"Sir, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." The request arrived with the particular tone that young men in uniform develop when they have been given authority over a gate and have decided the gate is the most important place in the world. Not unkind, exactly, but loaded with the implication that whatever happens next is entirely the visitor's fault. Specialist First Class Aaron Decker, 22 years old. Fort Bragg's Simmons Army Airfield Access Control Point, 6 months into his posting, leaned down to the window of the battered 2003 Ford pickup with the practiced authority of someone who has watched enough people fail to navigate this checkpoint to consider himself an expert in human error. The old man in the driver's seat took a moment to put the truck in park with the unhurried deliberateness of someone who is not performing slowness, but simply is not in a hurry. And then he opened the door and stepped out. His name was Eugene Aldous Merritt. He was 82 years old. He wore a plain blue button-down shirt, the kind sold in multi-packs, tucked into khaki trousers that had been pressed at some point earlier in the week with the careful domestic attention of a man who lives alone and has maintained certain standards anyway. His shoes were brown leather Oxfords with a shine that was not military fresh, but was genuine. The shine of a man who polishes his shoes because he was taught to and has not stopped. His white hair was combed. He was perhaps 5'10", slightly stooped at the shoulder in the way that tall men sometimes stoop after a certain age, as if a lifetime of ducking through doorways has become structural. His hands, resting at his sides as he stepped out, were large and steady and covered in the patient cartography of 82 years. He had handed Decker his identification card through the window a minute ago. Standard procedure, all visitors to the airfield required a valid government-issued ID and a verified appointment on the access log. Decker had scanned the card with the handheld reader, and the reader had taken longer than usual, and then it had returned a result that Decker had looked at twice before calling Specialist Reyes over from the second lane to look at it with him. They had both looked at it. Then they had laughed. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Exactly. The laugh of two young men confronted with something that seems to have gone wrong in an almost comedic way. A mutual acknowledgement that whatever this situation was, it was not what the old man in the button-down shirt had apparently intended it to be. "Sir," Decker said, and he had adopted the patient, slightly elevated tone people use with elderly individuals they have decided need managing. "This ID is coming back as the system's flagging it. The format doesn't match anything in our current database. It looks like it may be outdated or possibly, I don't want to say this, sir, but the system's suggesting it might not be legitimate." Eugene Merritt looked at him from beneath white eyebrows that were slightly longer than was strictly tidy, in the way that older men's eyebrows sometimes lose their discipline. His eyes were dark brown, nearly black in the morning light, with the depth of still water in a very deep container, not cold, but far down. The kind of eyes that have seen enough that they regard most things with a quality somewhere between patience and archaeology. "It's legitimate," he said. "Sir, I understand you believe that, but the scanner doesn't recognize the clearance level," Eugene said. His voice was a low-level thing, unhurried and undefensive. The voice of a man stating a fact about the weather. That's what it's flagging. Not the card. Decker looked at the card reader. He looked at Reyes. Reyes gave him a microscopic shrug that communicated, "I have no idea what he's talking about either." "Sir," Decker said, and his voice had acquired a very gentle but very definite quality of finality. The tone of a man wrapping up a situation. "I'm going to need you to pull your vehicle to the secondary inspection area. This ID is not clearing our system, and until we can verify your identity and your authorization, I cannot allow you access to the installation. If you have a sponsor or a point of contact on base, you're welcome to call them from." I don't have a point of contact, Eugene said. I have an appointment. The appointment was made through a scheduling channel that your system also won't recognize, for the same reason. And what reason is that, sir? Eugene looked at the gate, at the flags above the checkpoint, at the flat Carolina sky above the installation, and then back at Decker. There was nothing in his expression that was impatient. There was nothing that was amused, either. It was simply the face of a man who has encountered a version of this situation before, and who has learned that the most efficient path through it is to let it develop at its own pace. Because the clearance level on that card, he said, doesn't exist as far as your database is concerned, and the scheduling system it was booked through doesn't log to anything you have access to. That's not a malfunction. That's how it's supposed to work. Decker stared at him for a moment. Pull to secondary, sir, he said. Please. The secondary inspection area was a concrete apron 40 feet off the main gate lane, shaded by a corrugated metal roof that the Carolina sun had been heating since 7 in the morning, so that the air beneath it had the particular quality of a very large oven that someone had forgotten to turn off. There was a folding table, 2 metal chairs, a security camera in the upper corner angled to cover all of it, and a direct line phone to the airfield's Security Operations Center bolted to the support post. Eugene Merritt sat in one of the metal chairs with his hands resting on his knees and waited. Decker was at the phone. He had called the SOC with the ID card number and the scanner's flag result, and the duty sergeant had told him to hold, and he had been holding for approximately 90 seconds, which was beginning to feel like longer. Reyes was standing near the truck, maintaining a professional proximity that was slightly less comfortable than it appeared. 2 other vehicles had cleared the main lane in the time they'd been standing here, the drivers glancing at the secondary area with the mild curiosity of people who are glad it is not them. The old man had not taken out his phone. He was not checking the time. He appeared, in every observable respect, to be entirely comfortable waiting in a hot concrete apron in a metal chair for as long as the situation required, which was the posture of someone for whom waiting was not an imposition, but simply a condition, like weather. Decker's phone clicked. The duty sergeant came back on the line. Decker, Sergeant, read me that card number again. Exactly as it appears. Decker read it. A pause of perhaps 4 seconds. The kind of pause that has a shape to it, not the pause of someone thinking, but the pause of someone looking at something and deciding how to respond to it. Where's the cardholder right now? Secondary inspection, Sergeant, he's sitting in the chair. He's cooperative, the ID isn't clearing and he's claiming the clearance level is, don't touch the card. Decker looked at the card in his hand. Sergeant? Put it on the table. Don't touch it again. Don't let anyone touch it. Is the cardholder's name Eugene Aldous Merritt? I? Yes, Sergeant. How did you? How old does he look? The question was strange enough that Decker turned and looked at Eugene Merritt sitting in the metal chair, hands on his knees, apparently examining the middle distance with the mild interest of a man on a park bench. He's elderly, Sergeant. He said he's, 80. Listen to me carefully, Decker. Do not, under any circumstances, ask that man to leave the secondary area. Do not return his ID. Do not process him out. Do not touch him. Do not speak to him unless he speaks to you first. Do you understand? Yes, Sergeant. But I don't need you to understand. I need you to stand there and not do anything until you hear from me again. How long has he been in secondary? About 4 minutes. Another pause. Shorter this time, but with more weight in it. I need to make a call. Stand by. The line went to hold music, a generic instrumental, the kind that plays in the background of institutional waiting, and Decker lowered the phone slightly and looked at Reyes, and Reyes looked back at him, and neither of them said anything. because there did not seem to be anything appropriate to say. At the table, Eugene Merritt crossed his ankles and looked at the security camera in the corner with mild, incurious recognition. The look of a man who has been under surveillance so often and in so many circumstances that a camera is simply furniture. In the Security Operations Center, Staff Sergeant Brenda Calhoun had pulled the card number through 2 additional systems. After the duty sergeant had called her directly, he had called her because she had the access level for what the first system had returned, which the duty sergeant did not, and which had made him pick up the internal line and say her name in the tone that meant, "I need you." Now, and I can't explain over the general channel. What the second system returned had made her pick up a different phone, not the base line, a different line. The person who answered was not at Fort Bragg. "Authentication," said the voice on the line. "Professional. Flat. Not a greeting." Calhoun gave her own identification string, a sequence of numbers and letters she had memorized, but never spoken aloud on an active call before. Because this line was not for routine use, her hands were steady. She was a professional. But there was a quality in the room around her, the particular electrical charge of a room that has just received information that changes the nature of everything in it. That did not allow for complete steadiness everywhere. "I have a visitor at Simmons Airfield Access Control," she said. Card number, she read it. "He was flagged by the Level 1 scanner as unverifiable. He is in secondary inspection. The Level 3 system is returning she looked at her screen, a classification marker I have not seen before. There is a 2-letter prefix I don't have the key for." The voice on the other end said, "Read the 2 letters." She read them, a silence of 11 seconds. She counted. "Staff Sergeant Calhoun. I need you to do the following things in this order. First, you will call the installation commander's office and inform them that they have a guest on post who requires immediate senior escort. Use the name Eugene Aldous Merritt. Second, you will call the airfield's senior duty officer and have them clear a vehicle and driver for escort to Building 6. Third, you will personally ensure that the guest is comfortable in secondary until the escort arrives. Do you understand? Yes, can you tell me, what is the classification? The prefix, the voice said, is a legacy designation. It predates the current framework by roughly 40 years. It belongs to a program that was officially disbanded in 1987 and whose records are maintained by this office. A pause. Staff Sergeant, the man sitting in your secondary inspection area has a clearance level that your system flagged as invalid because it is, for most practical purposes, older than your system. It is not invalid. I would suggest moving quickly. The line ended. Calhoun sat for a moment with the phone in her hand. Then she moved quickly. The first thing Decker heard was his phone coming off hold. "Decker, the escort vehicle is 2 minutes out. When it arrives, the senior duty officer will take custody of the visitor and his ID card. Your role is complete. Stand easy." "Sergeant, can you tell me what who is?" "No," said the duty sergeant. "I can't." 2 minutes. What arrived in 90 seconds was a dark green Army staff car, not the standard pool vehicle, but the kind with the small flags on the front quarter panels that signal occupancy by someone senior enough to warrant them, moving through the gate with the deliberate clearance of a vehicle that security has been told to expect. It stopped at the secondary apron. The driver, a young sergeant in service dress, came out and opened the rear door. Then the installation commander came out of the front passenger side. Colonel Richard Strathmore, Simmons Army Airfield Installation Commander, was 50 years old and had been in the Army for 27 years and was not a man who personally collected visitors from secondary inspection. Decker had seen him 3 times in 6 months, all 3 times from a significant distance, and had a reasonable but entirely theoretical understanding of what it meant when a full colonel appeared without warning in the secondary inspection area. The understanding became less theoretical when Strathmore walked past Decker without looking at him, stopped in front of the metal table, and came to attention. The salute was precise and clean and held for 2 seconds. Rendered to an 82-year-old man in a blue button-down shirt sitting in a metal folding chair in a corrugated roof secondary inspection apron in the Carolina heat. Eugene Merritt rose from the chair and returned it. No ceremony, no performance. The return of something familiar. "Gene," Strathmore said, "I am sorry about this." The system did its job," Eugene said. So did the young man. He did not look at Decker, but the reference was clear. No harm done. Strathmore turned to Decker for the first time. His expression was not angry. It was the expression of a man who is about to give someone information they will not forget, and who understands that the giving of it is more important than any disciplinary consideration. "Specialist Decker," he said, "I'm going to tell you who you just put in a secondary inspection chair. And then you're going to go home tonight and think about what this day means." He looked at the card on the table. He did not touch it. He said, "Do you know what Special Activities Division is?" Decker did not. "It is the Central Intelligence Agency's Directorate for Covert Operations. It conducts operations that the United States government does not officially acknowledge. The personnel who conduct those operations do not officially exist in the frameworks your systems are built to recognize, which is the point." He looked at Eugene. "Chief Warrant Officer 5 Eugene Aldous Merritt, United States Army, Special Forces, attached to SAD-SOG, Special Operations Group, from 1969 through 1991. 22 years of operations conducted in theaters this installation does not have clearance to know the names of." Reyes had stopped pretending to be casual. "In that time," Strathmore continued, "he conducted operations in Southeast Asia, Central America, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East under cover identities that the United States government has never officially confirmed. The clearance level on his card, the one your scanner flagged as invalid, is a legacy designation from a program so compartmentalized that it was never integrated into post-1987 systems when the program officially closed. Because the people who held it were still operational, some of them for years after. A pause in which the heat of the afternoon and the distant sound of aircraft and the snap of flags above the gate were the only sounds. "His decorations are classified in their entirety," Strathmore said. "I do not have access to the full list. What I know, because this was briefed to me when I took command of this installation, is that he holds the Intelligence Medal, the Distinguished Intelligence Medal, and the Intelligence Star. The last of those 3 is the CIA's highest honor. It has been awarded 41 times in the agency's history. He let that number exist in the air for a moment. He also holds, because his service bridged military and intelligence operations, the Distinguished Service Cross and 2 Silver Stars, both classified, for actions that will probably not be fully declassified in either of your lifetimes." He looked at Decker and Reyes each in turn. "And the identifier on his file, the one that sent Staff Sergeant Calhoun to a phone she has never used before, is a counterintelligence flag placed there in 1988. It means that when his name is queried in a government system, a notification goes to an office in Langley, Virginia, not to see if he's authorized. He's authorized. To make sure he's all right." The flags above the gate snapped in a gust. An aircraft moved somewhere beyond the tree line, its sound expanding and then diminishing. Eugene Merritt picked up his ID card from the table and placed it in his shirt pocket with the flat, practiced motion of a man returning something to its proper place. He looked at Decker. His dark eyes held the same quality they had held at the window, patient, deep, carrying nothing that was trying to wound. "You did your job," he said. "Exactly the way you should have." A pause. The gap wasn't your failure. It was an old system meeting a newer one. That happens. He looked at the gate, at the flags, at the installation beyond it. Always find out what you're looking at before you decide you know what it is. The scanner tells you one thing. It doesn't tell you everything. He straightened his shirt cuffs. He nodded to Strathmore. He walked to the staff car. The consequences for Decker were minimal and appropriately so. A counseling entry, not punitive, documenting the incident for context, and a mandatory supplemental training on legacy credential systems, which turned out to be a 1-hour briefing that Decker sat through with the focused attention of someone who understands why they are there. He was told by the sergeant who conducted the briefing that the scenario he had encountered was so rare that most careers ended without producing one. This was not comfort so much as context, but he took it as both. 3 days later, on his own time and in his civilian clothes, Decker drove to the VFW hall on Yadkin Road that his grandfather had mentioned once. He did not know what he expected to find. He found a Tuesday afternoon with 4 men at the bar and a 5th in a blue button-down shirt reading a newspaper at the far end. He sat down 2 stools away. Then he moved to the one next to Eugene Merritt, because the distance felt dishonest. "Mr. Merritt," he said. Eugene looked up from the paper. He regarded Decker for a moment with those deep, still eyes. Then he put the newspaper down. "I wanted to apologize," Decker said, "for laughing at the gate. When the scanner flagged your ID, we laughed, and I've been thinking about that since, about what I didn't know and what I assumed," and he stopped. "I'm sorry." Eugene was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How long have you been on the gate?" "6 months. "You like the work?" Decker thought about it. "Yeah, I do actually," Eugene nodded slowly. "It's important work. People forget that. A gate is a threshold. What you let through and what you hold back matters." He turned the newspaper over on the bar. "The tool is there to help you. But the tool is not the judgment. The judgment is yours." Always, he looked at Decker. A card that doesn't scan isn't always a problem. Sometimes it's a history your system wasn't built to hold. Your job is to know the difference. He picked up the newspaper again, found his place, and continued reading. Decker stayed for a while. He ordered a coffee. Eugene didn't ask him to leave and didn't ask him to stay, which was itself a kind of welcome. After a time, Decker said, "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "All those years, all those operations, does anyone know?" "Outside of, does anyone, some do," Eugene said, without looking up from the paper. "The ones who were there. The ones who didn't make it home, in whatever sense you mean that." He turned a page. "That's enough." Decker thought about that for a long time on the drive back to base. He thought about gates and thresholds and the things that move through the world carrying histories that no scanner was built to read. He thought about a man in a blue shirt sitting in a metal folding chair in the Carolina heat, waiting without impatience, watching a security camera with the mild recognition of a man for whom surveillance is furniture. He thought about 22 years of operations in theaters the installation had no clearance to name, and about the notification that had gone to Langley, not to check his authorization, but to make sure he was all right. There are men walking the world right now whose existence is officially a different word than the word they know for themselves. They stand at gates and they hand over cards that don't scan. They sit in secondary inspection chairs and they wait, without complaint, for the world to catch up to what they are. They do not explain themselves. They have spent too many years being something that cannot be explained in a language anyone else speaks. The least we can do is slow down before we laugh. The least we can do is make room for the possibility that what looks like a mistake is a history we haven't been cleared to read. If you were moved by Eugene's story of quiet service and timeless wisdom, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to Veterans Valor for more stories of America's unassuming heroes. Script generated using the Veterans Valor Master Script Framework. Word count. Dial 4,150 words.